In passing now at the beginning of our final segment, you got this amazing brouhaha coming from the reactionaries about the default of the states, right? The Wall Street Journal had written about when states default 2011 meet 1841. 1841 was the handiwork of Andrew Jackson. The destruction of the Bank of the United States by Andrew Jackson opened the door to the Panic of 1837, and in that Panic of 1837, about half a dozen U.S. states went bankrupt, and some of them went bankrupt in 1841. So now we're hearing all this stuff about bankruptcy of states, big crisis in Illinois, continuing crises in New York, California, and every place else. We would need a real president would step up with revenue sharing to maintain the fabric of civilization rather than going in for union bashing of the type that Obama's been doing. It is interesting, though. People are now predicting the municipal bonds, muni bonds of the cities and states now becoming very dubious investments. Will that be the third wave of the Depression later this year or sometime next year? In other words, if the states default, who's going to take that on the chin? The zombie banks, in many cases, own this paper, and will that then be another demand for a bailout? Why not bail out the states right now, maintain social services, and allow the refinancing of that debt at 0% to avoid these defaults, rather than have to pay it all to Goldman Sachs when Illinois goes down later? You can see what's coming. But let's get back to this question of the internal waterways. Here we have a very interesting story in the Wall Street Journal, Thursday, January 6th. I'm just repeating it now for those who might have missed it. Belle Vernon, Pennsylvania. Here we have the Monongahela River. Monongahela River, known as the Mon River Valley. We have the Charleroi Locks and Dams, 75 years old. About 13 million tons of coal go through there every year, coming from the coal mines up the river in Pennsylvania and down the river to the Ohio River Valley coal-fired power plant. So here we are, 30 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. It's a double lock. One side is hopelessly broken down, so you're down to one lock. And that means, of course, waits that can vary from 2 to 12 hours, which is, of course, a cost for the people who operate the tugs and the barges. Tremendous amount of traffic goes through the 2,500 miles of waterways in the Ohio River system alone. This is all maintained by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So we're at the point where this one lock, if it breaks down, 75-year-old Charleroi Lock, you're going to have a blackout and a brownout in many areas of the Ohio River Valley. Now, there's a 20-year capital development program by the Inland Waterways User Board, which I guess is a lobby. They want the Army Corps of Engineers to spend $7.6 billion to fix the lock and dam system of the U.S. Over 20 years, with industry and government paying more. Well, wait a minute. We need 10 times that easily. We need $75 billion, and we need it in 2 to 3 years, tops, as fast as we can spend it. This one Charleroi complex, this is $1.5 billion to fix this one lock system on the Monongahela River. And the Wall Street Journal helpfully shows you these charts, how a lock works. They assume that the financiers and the quants and the asset strippers who read the Wall Street Journal don't know what a lock is. They don't know what a canal lock is. Well, it turns out that most of the grain, most of the coal that moves in the United States moves through the inland waterway system with locks. 60% of U.S. grain exports, 20% of coal. If you have the lock system in the U.S. breaking down, that's 60% of grain exports. What does that mean down at the end of the road there in sub-Saharan Africa where the grain might arrive? Could mean death, could mean genocide. So it's time to gear up this entire program. $75 billion would be a small down payment on what is essential, the rebuilding of this entire system. Now, in the past week, we've had the Wall Street Journal the Washington Post this time, publishing an article by a columnist they have by the name of Perlstein, who writes about an economist that deserves a little bit of attention because he's done some useful things in the past. This is now Barry Bluestone, economist based up in the Massachusetts area. He's the son of Irving Bluestone, who was a top official of the United Auto Workers, and unfortunately was part of the years of decline of the UAW. And the article, which is not new but is now referred to again here in the Washington, D.C. press, is that the unions, the public sector unions, public employees unions, have got to see the handwriting on the wall that they're going the same way as the UAW. They're losing power, and therefore they've got to hurry up and make preventive concessions on their wages, pensions, working conditions, and so forth, because if they don't participate in cutting their own throats, essentially, in austerity against themselves, then the austerity will go through anyway, and they will not be able to moderate it, influence it, or otherwise avoid the worst. And I think this is the counsel of defeat, and this is the wrong way to do it. Now, Barry Bluestone, deserves respect and made an important contribution in this book, The Great U-Turn. In other words, he's been studying the decline of working people, the decline of the middle class in the United States, and in particular, the decline from the change from rising standards of living and a high-wage economy to falling standards of living and a tendency towards a low-wage economy, which can be dated between Carter and Reagan. So between the Carter and the first term of Reagan, you get the great U-turn, deregulation, privatization, the abandonment of typical New Deal commitments by the Democratic Party under Carter. And, of course, Carter is the prototype for Obama. He says what the unions need to do is to try to go for a grand bargain. In particular, the public sector unions, they've got to have immediate freezes on their wages and benefits. It's not so much that I think that every detail that he has here is wrong. It's just that the defensive posture is wrong. Let's go back. The German unions in 1931 were also on the defensive, but they had the sense to bring in W.S. Wojtyński, the WTB, Wojtyński, Tarnow, and Bada program, which was to demand 3 billion Reichsmarks of the time for public works, to build highways, railroads, telephone systems, and so forth. And if you had been able to employ 2-3 million of the German unemployed in 1931, 1932, maybe by the time you got to 1933, you would not have had Hitler. So this is the way that you've got to see it. A purely defensive posture is always a loser in politics, in war, in any other human endeavor. A purely defensive posture cannot win. There's got to be an offensive component along with it. And what are these components? Rather than just sit there and say, let's try to mitigate the austerity that will be visited on working people, the offensive component, which is tax Wall Street, sales tax for Wall Street, tax Wall Street speculation on the turnover first. The Tobin tax, the Wall Street sales tax, is the crying necessity from Annapolis to Albany to Springfield to Sacramento, every state capital. There should be people out there saying, don't gouge us. Wall Street must pay their fair share. Tax Wall Street turnover, and then, of course, tax speculative incomes. Another thing you can do is stop fraud closures and challenge the right-wingers. Say, boys, you're worried about private property. You're worried about the sanctity of home ownership. Well, if a zombie bank takes your property away, don't you want to stand up and fight that, or are you guys just a bunch of libertarian, Austrian, ideological fakers? One other interesting point, very briefly, the Stilwell Road, the Lido Road, built by the U.S. in World War II, back when we had giants in the earth here, is going to be revived, but it's going to be revived by Chinese engineering companies. So you can see the way it's going. We've got to revive the engineering industrial spirit of science, technology, and progress in this country, do it with 0% federal credit and stop with this free market malarkey. And we'll see you next week on World Crisis.